So the thing with liberalism is that it has to be ahistorical, because if you actually understand what's happening in the world, you're not going to put up with it. So it functions based on illusion. I mean, all power does to some degree. You have to project power, right? So like there's a certain amount of like false consciousness that happens in order for you to accept any kind of authority. Plato called that the noble lie. But for the US, the biggest thing that allows rich people, rich, racist, white supremacist imperialists to continue to get it rich and have nobody revolt against them is by brainwashing everybody, brainwashing them into thinking that there is no past, there is no future, there's only the present, the power of now. Forget everything. Anything that's not immediately right now is irrelevant, is useless. It has no meaning. It has no bearing. Consume, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, if you grow up in that kind of environment, then yeah, you're going to be dumb as fuck. You're going to be stupid as shit. Like our Asian activists, bro, they're taking money from the Ford Foundation, a foundation that was explicitly designed to crack down on feminism, African-American civil rights, minority civil rights, and against anti-imperialism.
Okay, but do you think, like, for example, Angry Asian Man, he's like a Korean guy. I think he's probably like 40 now.
He's paid by the Ford Foundation, bro. You think they would...
Yeah, do you think he just doesn't know, or he's paid not to talk about it? Or
he doesn't know. They just find useful idiots.
Okay.
Right? Like, there's nothing very... I don't know Phil in person, all right? So, and I've heard that he used to be better and, like, all this kind of stuff, right? But the thing is, you're not going to get to any kind of position in American white liberal society. And remember, liberal includes both right-wing, this so-called quote-unquote right-wing, which doesn't exist, this conservative, and which doesn't exist either. I'm sorry. Let's just call them fascist, all right? Like, they've adopted fascist ideology, really. And so their whole thinking is, what is to be done, right? I went to East-West Players show. Have you been?
No.
Okay. So East-West Players is all these like Asian Americans in the performing arts and drama and all that kind of stuff, right? And I went to like one of their poetry slam sessions, and they were all talking about, oh, I'm not like your fetish object. I hate yellow fever. Oh, I'm a gay Asian guy. Like I need to come out. Like, okay. What else?
There's nothing anti-imperialist.
No. There's nothing anti-racist or anti-imperialist. Because if you're anti-racist, you have to be anti-imperialist. You can't have one without the other.
So everything was just about the basic, common Asian fetish this or...
Yeah, superficial understandings of the issues that are mostly faced by privileged middle-class Asian Americans who came from families that had a little bit of resources when they first immigrated here and had the right, quote unquote, mindsets to fit into American society.
I think it was Plan A. I think they call this boba liberalism, something like that.
Yeah, boba liberalism. That's funny because they're all liberal too.
Ooh, Plan A?
Yeah, Plan A magazine. Yeah, no, it's funny. I say that out of love. Like the founder of that magazine and I used to podcast for years.
Who's the founder?
He goes by Teen Shang.
Yeah, that's the guy who's on the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
You used to do a podcast with him?
Yeah, that podcast that him and I did actually split off into Plan A. And he invited me to join, but I was too frustrated. We actually had many arguments. This motherfucker would tell me, and I say this affectionately, this motherfucker would tell me that he was a Maoist, but then get freaked out and say that I was like too revolutionary. I'm like, you're a Maoist. You believe in killing landlords. Like, the fuck? Get the hell out of here. You're not actually Maoist. You just read the red book and think it's cool topic of conversation at dinner parties.
It does seem like some of the, I mean,
they're a little bit more radical because I had a significant influence on this guy. He used to be a real uncle before that. All these guys. Anybody that like is saying anything anti-racist or anti-imperialist online, generally I've had some encounter with them. Where basically I had to lecture them for hours, if not like days, weeks, months.
Do you know the other Plan A hosts then? Or?
Not the later ones, not the later ones. It was mostly like the ones in the beginning.
Okay. Have you thought about reaching out to them to do something, regarding COVID-19?
I think it's tough, right? Because here's the thing, like the things that they would do. There's a reason, like, I don't engage in the public sphere anymore, Mike. And for a couple reasons, like there's also, like holding the views that I hold, and like it's a dangerous ideology, like it's a dangerous way of looking at the world if you live in America, because it's the heart of the evil empire. And I've said that before, like online, and I think people think I'm just like a liberal using metaphors. No, motherfucker. I actually mean that this is the evil fucking empire, and America is the Death Star.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've met communists who are very, they say, I know one Korean lady who says, like, really she just goes off on the United States and
Yeah.
like any chance she gets. But, hearing the things that you've said, I mean, weren't you also involved with the guys behind ANBM, Asians Not Brainwashed by Media? They seem
No. So they actually reached out to me, but I got frustrated. Like I get frustrated with all the Asian guy spaces because it's too liberal. They're all liberal.
Well, they seem to be mostly more the, I guess you would call it the right wing, or the Trump supporter, or the
Right, which is liberal, right?
CNN. They're against the Democrats, basically.
That's hilarious. You guys are like the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme.
And there's another group that was spun from the Asians Not Brainwashed by Media.
Yeah.
I guess some of the Asian guys, or the Asian members in there who I guess felt ANBM was not conservative enough. They started their own group called Asians Not Brainwashed by the Liberal Media. And
Well, you know what's interesting, bro, and this is how you can tell who a liberal really is. And remember, again, there's no such thing as right wing. Conservative and liberal just means liberal, right? So looking at liberals, the one thing you will notice is that they have no plan of action.
Except vote.
Right, yeah, vote or, buy, right? Like literally just be little sheep for the machine, Like, when I was younger, I used to try to encourage people, even though I myself never believed in electoralism. I remember one guy asking me, some Asian guy, young guy, asking me, like, if I had to vote for the most leftist candidate in this presidential election, who should I vote for? I thought, well, yeah, probably Bernie Sanders, but he's a white supremacist imperialist like all the rest of them, just so you know. I don't believe in elections, in a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, right, where everything is run by the business. If it's all run by business, then they're not going to let anybody in there that's going to threaten their interests, right? Their financial interests. So I think the point being, if you're a liberal, you have no way, you cannot fathom changing society. Okay, you've been trained to believe in the status quo because the status quo is what benefits the people in charge, right? The last thing they want you to do is march down to Congress and Capitol Hill and like just hang all the motherfuckers that are sitting there.
Okay.
So, you can't think of anything more American than that, but it is what it is. Asians just, like the liberalism just warps their minds into thinking you're not a part of the political process other than by wearing like an I voted sticker or like, oh, I went to like a hot pot place owned by Chinese people. None of this shit will materially change anything.
So ultimately, are you saying that nothing's going to change no matter what?
No, that's what I would say if I was a liberal, you see.
But you're not a liberal. Do you really believe that Asian Americans will rise up and eventually, do what's necessary?
I think it's possible because they did it in 1969 and we were much smaller. We were much more like oppressed.
But looking at things now, I think the mindset is just, how are you going to change so many minds?
I mean, that's the problem. I think that's a problem all leftists face, right? Before the advent of Bernie Sanders, like white people had totally forgotten about socialism, which, by the way, just because you believe in communism and socialism doesn't mean I'm down with you either, because there is such a thing as like white socialism or Aaron vote democracy, where you want the benefits of socialism, but only for like either members of the imperial core or white people, you know, right? So like that's not obviously true equality or justice, right? You just want a bigger cut of the pie from empire. But I mean, if you're truly looking at it, I think that you can never tell. For me, I feel like I've been burnt out because like I had a lot of fights that nobody will ever know. I had a lot of struggles that people will never understand, that nobody else would be around for, right? And I'm not going to name names, and I'm not going to blow those things up or like whatever, right? But like after a while, you begin to realize, well, unless the material conditions change, I myself as a person can only do so much through sheer force of will. You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. But at least for me, it's easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The plan is always easy. Organize enough people, get them pissed off enough about their material conditions, which they're, like wake them up, educate them, agitate them, get them to think that, hey, a better future is possible, right? And then seize the fuck out of shit.
It does seem now would be the time during COVID-19 where people are not, I mean, I guess some people are getting a stimulus check, but a lot of people are going without any money whatsoever, and they can't pay their rent, they can't for food.
I would say now would be a great time to be organizing. Like it's funny because my Taiwanese bro just came back, and he was telling me in New York there's all these WeChat groups of Chinese people that are very much functioning like Neighborhood Watch or Black Panther. It's like literally there's a WeChat group where you input coordinates of your location, and like a couple Chinese dudes are going to show up with like bats and golf clubs and hammers, and it's just like some shit from back in my frat days. You know what I mean? So like this shit happens. The question is like, what are people doing, right, with that time? Like if you're in COVID-19, like if you really think about things that change the world or change like the shape of society, usually it's wars and disasters, right? And epidemics are a disaster. So you're at a unique situation where like, think about the economy. It's like crashed, right? It tanked. You have 16 million unemployed. I'm curious how many Asians are suffering, right? Like, again, that's my focus. Like I always have to be centering Asians just because we're so marginalized. And when I'm looking at that, I'm like, who's really talking to these restaurant owners? Who's talking to the people that were working in the boba shops? Like the Asian girls that come over here, like for school or like whatever, stay on their OPTs or their visas trying to find work, like what's going to happen to all of them, right? Especially if they don't have the financial resources to go back to Asia, or like they don't have family to stay with, and reaching out and talking to them, creating mutual, it's funny, the WeChat groups call them mutual assistance, mutual aid. It's like a Marxist anarchist term. But anyways, like there's things you can be doing, and who knows, right? The revolution cannot, maybe it's not today, maybe it's not tomorrow, but sometimes it just happens suddenly, like
Is there a new Red Guard or I Work Quinn party today, or?
No, not from Asians in America, sadly. I think that's sort of where like Asian frats were born out of that like activism, this idea of building pan-Asian solidarity. But after the 80s and 90s, when liberalism had a resurgence and they co-opted basically all these communist movements and made them into these like performative, virtue signaling, hypocritical bullshit, right? Like Joe Biden, right? Like fucking Joe Biden. He's a rapist too, but who cares, right? As long as he's a Democrat. Like it's like that, right? Yeah. So that they've created that situation. So it's tough. But I would like to, I think it's a natural human reaction to during difficult times, during times of hardship. People can eat each other, but people can also come together. So I think understanding the context, like you cannot be going around acting all shocked or surprised that this is happening. You cannot be acting like this has never happened before. It has happened before. The reason why you think it hasn't is because the society, American country, refuses to acknowledge what it did to Asian American men and the Asian race in general, you know, through wars, endless wars, continuing wars, and illegal coups, yeah, all this bullshit, right? I think the only way that you're gonna get that resurgence is if people start to be educated more. That's the only reason why I'm on here today, because I'm just,
that's what we're doing.
yeah, because I'm sick and tired of like hearing coronavirus responses that really don't address the heart of the matter, right? Like you have basically what's like, they all look like shocked white people, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know racism was real. Yeah, children internalize racist hierarchies by the age of 3. Child development studies have shown this. So if you're saying that, it means your conscious mind, because your brain has both a conscious and an unconscious. Okay, Daniel Kahneman calls it system 1, 2. And the way you act and behave is mostly driven by the unconscious. Your conscious mind, you know, the running dialogue or monologue in your head, you know, that's your conscious. They've had their consciousness wiped out, like any consciousness of racism. They still act as though racism is real in real life. They behave as though racism is real, right? Like, why else would you suck up to like white guys or white people or like all this shit, right? But they consciously say to themselves, I have never encountered racism, even though that's blatantly false. And if you have no identity, okay, because Asian America is a resistance identity, right? It's a communist, revolutionary, pro-Asian ideology. That's what Asian America means. The way we defined ourselves back in like the 1969 era, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it means to be Asian American. But until Asians in America rediscover what it means to be Asian American, they're going to continue to just get fucked up blindly in the streets. And you know, and this is a fucked up part of me, Mike, but there's a part of me that thinks they deserve it.
Right.
You know, because all this shit is free and accessible. You can learn about it, but you choose to be a stormtrooper instead of a rebel, you see? That's a choice.
I guess, I don't know, perhaps we need better leaders, not apart from Angry Asian Man or 18 million whatever and all these other, I mean, you know, NBC has their own Asian America thing going on. HuffPost had Asian Voices.
Right.
There's all these
liberal bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah.
All liberal bullshit. And the funny thing is, those are not even the worst. If you actually look at the people that, okay, so those guys are just like the, what do you call the media, right? The fourth estate, right? Is it the fourth or the fifth? I think the fifth is like the blogosphere. Anyways, yeah, fourth or fifth estates. These are just like, you know, advertising, right? Like the real people that are like, you know, running city councils, you know, working behind the scenes, you know, running small business conferences or what have you, like running all these Asian American centric organizations that interface with like large white corporations in order to promote a certain vision of Asians in America. Mm-hmm. Yo, those guys are even worse. Those guys are even worse, like truly greedy, traitorous bastards. And I use that in a gender neutral way.
Any specific names you want to point out, or?
No, I think it's enough to say that if anybody has, all right, if any Asian, let me put it like this, okay? If an Asian American is not communist and is not third worldist, all right, third worldist being like Asian nationalist, right? Like you believe in the sovereignty of Asian countries the same way the Treaty of Westphalia established the sovereignty of European countries. If you believe in that, then I trust you. If you're not willing to say those things, then you're clearly also an enemy. You know, you're just one of their dogs. Like, remember the Boxer Rebellion? It's funny to me they named themselves after the Boxers because the Boxers actually killed more Chinese people than they did white people when they rebelled. Because they understood the truth. You need to kill the traitors. Like, you can't function as a body politic, right, when you have all these traitors undermining you from the inside. And that goes across the spectrum, okay? Once again, Democrats, Republicans, doesn't fucking matter. Either identification with either of those parties means that you're the enemy. you're the uncle.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Well, I think we got to wrap it up. So, any last words on? I mean, what do we do? Just got to educate ourselves, and then when mobilize.
There's a good essay, you know, not to pimp some like red literature. I would argue like try reading Vladimir Lenin's What Is to Be Done, or even just read Frantz Fanon, you know, Wretched of the Earth. Jesus, like that's an old school, that's a classic. That, you know, Fanon inspired Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, right? And by the way, Martin Luther King was strapped to the gills. He had an armory of guns in his house. Okay, so like there is no, you know, in the popular hagiography, there's always this idea of there's peaceful protests and there's, you know, like the violent revolutionary protests. All right, Martin Luther King was a revolutionary. There was no like really much of a distinction, right? Other than like the whole, oh, I'm going to be non-violent or whatever, right? But he says that and has like 1 million guns in his house, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that all real social change does not come about from sitting on your ass, lifting weights, or trying to do things like on an individual level when you're trapped in a system that is working against you. You need to change the system. How do you change the system? You need to find the throats to choke, right? The people that are accountable, replace them with your own people. How do you do that? You think they're just going to give it to you? You think you suck their dicks in like corporate, like they're just going to elevate you to that like holy grail? You know, you think you're going to be going to Bohemian Grove with like former presidents and like partying it up with Kissinger? No. The only way you're going to get to those positions of power is if you seize them by force.
I can see why the mainstream media doesn't often never has communists on. Yeah, I'm definitely not very advertiser friendly. Okay.
Right, exactly. You know, like how can you make money, right? Espousing communist ideology. That would be a scam.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for, I mean, I don't know exactly what we covered. We went through a lot of different things, but
I think what we did was we just kind of reset context, you know, like we didn't get back to 1969 because otherwise you're going to end up like 1890. You feel me? It's either 69 or 89, you know, you get to pick, right? Do you want to get massacred and lynched and have your penis chopped off and toasted over an open flame? I'm serious. This is what they did to us. They actually treated us like this. They took trophies of Asian penises after massacring Asian guys. Like, I can't even make this shit up. Like, it's so grotesque. The history is so brutal. And like, we just pretend like it never happened.
This is white history, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's our history too. And the fact is that those people are the same people. The people today are the same people descended from those people. You know, they're doing the exact same shit, even down to the travel ban from China. And like, so you really, I'm saying this with optimism, even though, you know, I practice revolutionary defeatism. None of that bullshit is going to work, right? But I think the optimism is important to say that in this time period, you know, like really think about less about, you know, like how do you like spread like, you know, or say something as an individual to speak out. Like think more so about connecting with other Asian Americans. Think more so about organizing in a way so that you can build natural community networks, support and infrastructure for each other. Because without that, if all you're doing is going around bitching on like New York Times that someone told you to go back to China, or you're going on Twitter to say, oh, it's not okay to be racist towards Asians, hashtag I'm not a virus, like all this bullshit, okay? That's not gonna do anything. You know what's gonna do something? Rooftop Koreans, you know? If motherfuckers are like harassing you or jumping you in the street, like you need to be ready to defend yourself. And that goes for anybody that's, you know, anybody, right? And understand too that the roughest, toughest, biggest gangsters on the block is always going to be, you know, the current incarnation of the U.S. government. It is what it is.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Mr. Yoon Dong-ju.
Yeah, there's a reason why I use a pseudonym. He was a real one, by the way. He was a real one.
Died at a very young age.
Yeah.
Died before the age we're at now.
Yeah, he was all the really like Fred Hampton, all the really truly, like
Fred Hampton, wasn't he only like early 20s?
yeah, exactly. Like the real idealists, except for like people like Fidel Castro, like
Oh, he
goals.
survived many assassination attempts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Fidel Castro, they once sent his ex-girlfriend to kill him. The CIA sent his ex-girlfriend to kill him, and he ended up fucking her, and she chose not to do it. I wish I was making this is a real story.
Wow.
Yeah, the CIA plotted to have his ex-girlfriend assassinate him, but the game was too strong.
Okay. Well, thanks, and we'll do one of these again, and
Yeah,
talk some other areas, perhaps.
I mean, hopefully, COVID-19 isn't unexpected. We're in uncharted waters because it's been a while since an epidemic of this proportion or size, really like brought the global order to its knees, right? The Western liberal democracy, global, like, Bretton Woods and all those kinds of things. Like it really brought all these countries to their knees.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even an army that did it, right? And it's just a question of now that we're in this space, this white space where suddenly everything seems possible. The only way we're going to move forward as a collective and even as individuals is not to say some bullshit like, oh, most people aren't racist, because that's obviously false. That's a lie. And to spread that lie is actually causing a lot of material harm to a lot of Asians.
What was this pickup artist's name?
I think he goes by Squatting Casanova, and I'm not even trying to single him out. I feel like, whether it was him or someone else, they were going to say it, and it's just so happened that it was him that triggered me. So
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to check out his video later to see what he says.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know like whether his PUA shit works or not. I don't even care. But like, I think Asians do themselves a real disservice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are our own worst enemy.
Yeah, get back to being 69 Asians. I miss those guys.
Yeah, IWK, we need to bring that back. All right. Well, thanks, and talk to you again later.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. You have a good one, all right?
All right, you too.
Yeah, appreciate it.